if you've been into Western personal growth for a long time like I have, you may have studied a lot of different great gurus, and you've been using and applying a lot of different great techniques. And you might be frustrated though. You might be at that point at this time that you're just really frustrated and you can't break through. There's like these invisible barriers that are really stopping you, keeping you at a plateau with your own self-improvement. So if you've been in that situation and now you saw and loved The Secret, and there's these other cool things going on that are conscious, and you're starting to get into spirituality more, maybe you meditate, well, that stuff's very exciting, but you still value Western personal growth. Well, how can you possibly break through? Because it seems like all of the world of spirituality is separate. It's like this separate yumminess. It's all there. Meditation, ancient Eastern wisdom, and all the great spiritual teachers coming from the East. Taoism, Buddhism, and the great teachers from India. But if you're watching this, you probably really value that, discovering more of that, and you really value that more Western, just practical personal improvement that you can apply to things. So how do you break through? How can you really kind of get the best of both worlds? Well, to really break through, it comes down to, and this is foundational, it comes down to your definition of self. What is your definition of self? Do you have an answer for that? Because I'm going to get some great, amazing questions out that'll really stretch your reality out. When you can ask yourself, what is my definition of self? I mean, we've heard like the general philosophical, who am I kind of a thing. And that's a very important question. And I know that you value practical personal development on all levels, and you're also interested in spirituality. So to really break through, it comes down to your definition of self. And why do I say that? Because if you notice, there's this split between spirituality, or your spiritual self, and your personal self. It's like you go to work, and it's like compartmentalize your personal improvement, your education, your skill sets, your continuing expanding journey of more mind, improving your mind, your conscious mind, and then your spiritual side. And it's kind of like you can get caught in this cycle of working hard and then getting burnt out, and then balancing with meditation and yoga, Zen meditation, to really balance out and explore more of your spiritual side. But if the breakthrough here comes down to self, because your self consciousness is everything, what is your definition of self? And this is where I'm probably going to really start stretching your reality and what you think or know is possible in a more expanded way. So what I represent is self-awakening, and what I teach is that the definition of self is a practical, human valuing, humanistic experience. Because if you notice in spirituality, a lot of people into spirituality and the gurus and so forth, they have a spiritual definition of self. Soul is the valuation. And when we look at traditional Western personal development, the valuation, filter, and identification of self is mind. So you have mind and soul. Well, then there's also the body, right? Mind, body, medicine, mind, body, and soul. That may be your answer for what is your definition of self. So with mind, body, and soul, and that's really where the most conscious people are, is just in generally what I'm seeing out there in the world is mind, body, and soul. A lot of Westerners believe that they're a physical body, and then they have their mind, which is mostly their ego, their egoic self, and everything that goes with that. So the most evolved people is like mind, body, and soul is what we're seeing out there as a state of the industry. So what is your definition of self? You can ask yourself that. What is my definition of self? Is it mind, body, and soul? And then for your personal development, instead of breaking through the plateaus, maybe it's more like that compartmentalization, where there's that split between mind and soul. It's like they're these separate things. But wait a minute, if we're really spiritual beings, why is there such a difference? Why is there such a compartmentalization? There's the mind, and then my personal self, and my work, and improving my skills and hobbies, and becoming better, and doing all these Western style things. And then spirituality, it seems so separate, because it comes down to the definition of self. So how do we break through? And that's getting back to where we were coming at from. How do we really break through? How do we get you to the next level? And it's a different angle I'm coming in here with this. If you follow my stuff in the past, if not, here's where things get crazy from this angle. What is your definition of self? My definition of self is a spiritual one, but it's not mind, body, and soul. Well, if it's not mind, body, and soul, what could it be? Interesting question, right? My definition of self, get ready for this, because I think intuitively you will know that something is coming together here. My definition of self is mind, body, heart, sexiness, and soul. So a self-improvement strategy, a personal growth strategy, would include evolving yourself on the different levels of self. So, for example, there are a lot of similarities between spirituality and Western personal growth, because it's still about improvement. With spirituality, it's awakening to higher levels of spiritual consciousness, connecting more to the source of who you really are as conscious energy, spiritually. So you're really improving yourself with spirituality, improving your ability to experience higher levels of spiritual consciousness, to feel more of that spiritual energy in your subjective experience of reality, away from the mind. But again, there's that split, like the mind and soul. I work and then I meditate to balance out. You're balancing between those. But if we really are spiritual, with a definition of mind, body, heart, sexiness, and soul, all areas of self-consciousness are bridged. And you may have felt there's something missing. Why can't I break through the plateau? And there's that separation between mind and body and soul. But with mind, body, heart, sexiness, and soul as your definition of self, if you were to ever get to that understanding, it would basically change your life forever, because everything is spiritual, everything is energy. You are actually, even your body is spiritual. It's waves of vibrating energy. So everything is non-physical. Spirituality, spiritual energy is non-physical energy. So when we look at your self-consciousness, your practical human experience, mind, body, heart, sexiness, and soul is mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and sexual conscious energy, or spiritual energies. Heart is emotional consciousness. It's the closest real thing to what that actually is, experientially. If you leave heart out of your definition of self, like most Westerners, professional, educated, do, yet somehow heart is so valued in other cultures and like entertainment, performance, communities, artists. If you leave heart out of your definition of self, you're not very conscious there. And if that's a practical big part of your human experience, your self-consciousness, if you're leaving your heart out of it, you're not conscious there, it starts creating these big gaps. So if you're mind, body, and soul, but your actual human experience is mind, body, heart, sexiness, and soul, and sexiness is my term for sexual consciousness, and we're just looking at the big picture of human experience here. If you have that soul valuation of self, a spiritual definition of self, that's great if you're only into spirituality. But practical Western, we'll just reference, human experience massively includes your emotional and sexual consciousness as well, which are also spiritual because they are non-physical conscious energies. So really, spirituality is really the ultimate personal growth because you are spiritual. So at this point, this day and age in human history, we're now fusing spirituality with Western personal growth in all areas of self-consciousness. So instead of just improving yourself with your mind or your ego, your personality, your preferences, opinions, and skill sets improving, and that's great. I mean, I do that as well. When you take that personal growth strategy into the other areas of self-consciousness, things really get ridiculous, because away from the egoic mind, the rest of your consciousness is spiritual. You may not have known that you can actually do heart meditation and sexual meditation. You can be in states of pure emotional consciousness. That is also spiritual. So it's really just how we define things, how we qualify things. So I encourage you to check out my other videos and get into more of this, because when you can adopt an expanded definition of self that actually includes and qualifies how you actually experience life, which is mental, spiritual, and physical, not just mind, body, and soul, but also heart, emotional, and sexual consciousness, then you can have all of those answers you've been looking for filled as you awaken, which is, because it's spirituality, it's really awakening to the power that's already there, that already is, that you have, because you are spiritual. It's just we're qualifying on a more specific level. That heart and sexiness is also spiritual, and it massively influences your day, your feelings, your emotional consciousness, your heart. If you're not conscious there, then there's more drama. So it's really, we're just differentiating the types of spiritual energies. Okay, so what is your definition of self? If you really want to break through that plateau, when you value both Western personal development and spirituality, when you expand that definition of self to include the entirety of your self-consciousness, instead of just your mind and then balancing with the spiritual self, but you include your heart and sexuality as well to be more conscious in all of those areas, miracles start happening in your life, and those answers that you were looking for, you start finding them yourself, because now we're improving on all levels. And that's where the future is headed, and we're here now. It's the fusing, because Western personal growth is discovering more about spirituality, and spirituality and the Eastern kind of history with all of that, there's so much power and value there. When you can combine the two to really improve yourself and awaken the higher levels of spiritual consciousness experientially in your heart, mind, body, sexiness, and soul, we call that awakening. And there's other teachers out there who value spiritual awakening. The thing is, practically, I'm so glad to bring this to you and to the world, because it's not just about spiritual awakening that's separate from your mind. Okay? It's the entirety of your consciousness. Maybe you've heard about the mind and then the universal mind. The more conscious you is where you receive flow literally from the universe, from higher consciousness. Breakthroughs, ahas, it just comes to you. That's the capital mind. So really, if you were into Western personal growth and have a hard-driving ego definition of self, my goodness, things are now opening up, because most of your consciousness is spiritual anyways. We're talking about your awakened daily consciousness, and there's subconsciousness as well, but how you experience things is on those levels. So when you can expand that definition of self, it will start giving you breakthroughs. Like, not only will you go beyond your plateau, you'll start finding all kinds of answers, and you'll find ways to fuse spirituality, because there really was no separation between them. And it's just, we're in such an exciting day and age. So I encourage you to look at expanding your definition of self to break through. So instead of mind, body, and soul, if you expand your definition of self to include what's already there with the spirituality of your heart and sexual consciousness, you will find that everything starts fusing and life becomes more amazing. You heal your problems in those areas, your anxieties. You have more vitality, more youthfulness, more inspiration. And so we're just gonna finish this video with that. And I encourage you to look into expanding your definition of self. And you can join our free self-awakening community at self-awakening.com. And there you can contact, connect, share with others who are into conscious personal growth and spirituality, different techniques that's out there in spirituality and personal growth, the most cutting edge stuff. And it's free to join our community. So that's at self-awakening.com, and I'll talk to you later.